Good evening. Yes, Kurt is up. I didn't know that was going to be that loud. My name is Kurt Carlson. I'm the Associate Dean of Faculty and Academic Affairs here at the Raymond A. Mason School of Business. I have two responsibilities tonight. The first is to welcome you, and the second is to introduce our keynote speaker. So let's get started with the first of those. I'll just say we're going to be delivering dessert. While this is all going on, you should feel comfortable to continue eating, eat your dessert, drink your wine. I feel bad for those of you whose backs are to me when it comes to eating dessert. I've been in that position. Do your best. So, welcome to your home away from home. Maybe you didn't know this, but when you joined the Mason School, you picked up a vacation home, a second home, a place that we will always welcome you, and we hope that you come back on a regular basis. You know, it's funny, joining a school, picking a school is not like most choices we make in our lives. Most choices that we make are sort of one-directional. You know, you want a box of cereal, you go to the store, you pick a box of cereal. The box of cereal doesn't talk back to you. You want a new car, you pick a car, you buy a car. You want a beer, you pick a beer. You want a glass of wine, you ask for a glass of wine. It's one-directional. Joining a school is much more relational. It's more like finding a partner or a spouse. You look around, you do some sampling, you learn as much about what it's going to be like beforehand. When you find something that you think fits, that's going to be good, you ask, would you like to become my partner? And then you wait. You saw something in the Mason School, and we saw something in you, and then this partnership started. You applied. We said, yes, we want you to become part of our partnership. And so it's with that that I say welcome home, partners, and welcome home to your home away from home for the rest of your life. Now, before I get to my second responsibility, which is introducing Sean Boyer, I'd like to recognize some of the people who are the closest partners to you. These are the people that are partners in your success right now, and hopefully will help you develop a strong partnership with the Mason School. That's Pam and her team, Pam Suzadell, Allie, Diane, Aaron. These are people that are working around the clock. Even when they're asleep, they're thinking about how to make your experience better. They come in energized and active. They try their best within a system that sometimes has unimaginative constraints, and they find clever ways around them, all with the idea that they're trying to strengthen and improve your experience. And so I would like to just take a moment to thank them for helping them. I would also like to recognize the Mason School faculty. I know that Graham is taking excellent care of you. I see that in the fact that he's lost his voice and hoping that it will recover tomorrow. Thank you, Graham. But there are dozens of faculty, some of whom you've met and some of whom you've not met, that are responsible for the success of the program that you're experiencing. Larry probably mentioned this last night, but in case he didn't, and even if he did, it doesn't hurt to mention it again, that our MBA program just came out in the rankings in the last couple weeks at 30th. And just this past week, our undergraduate program came out as 12th. Top 5 if you're considering just public schools. That's great, right? What does that have to do with this program? Well, it turns out that the rankings that those two programs enjoy, their success, if you dig into the foundation of them, is based primarily on our school's ability to teach. We have some of the best teachers. Indeed, the Business Week, the Bloomberg ranking lists our faculty and their ability to teach as number one in the world. Princeton, number 2. Now, you might say, okay, but that's in the MBA full-time. No. We're not like that. Our faculty develop programs, develop courses, and teach across all of our programs. The same people that built those programs and designed those courses and delivered those courses that have led to those accolades designed and built the program and the courses that you're in and deliver the courses that you're taking right now. We may be too young to have been recognized in the rankings. We may not be on all the lists yet, but you know where we belong. We're world class. We're not one of the best in the state. We're not one of the best in the region. We're not one of the best in the United States. We're one of the best in the world, world class. So when you take great programs, and great faculty, and phenomenal students, and you put them together, you get great alumni. And one of our great alums is here tonight to speak to you. Now, you know that one of the things that we pride ourselves on at the Mason School is helping prepare students to lead lives of principled achievement. At its most basic level, principled achievement means not doing harm to others. At a slightly higher level, it's looking out to do good in the world. At its highest level, people that live lives of principled achievements let their principles define what achievement means for them and let them guide the career choices that they make. There are few people that have done this better than our speaker tonight. He's a person who likes a lot of what social media has to offer, but was frustrated with how it doesn't seem to nurture relationships as well as it should, the close, meaningful relationships. Rather than pout about it, he did something. He went out and he started a company, Go Happy, to take the best of what these social media platforms have to offer and make them better for nurturing the most important relationships in our lives. Please join me in welcoming the CEO and founder of Go Happy, a William & Mary alum and a member of your extended family, Sean Boyer.
All right. Happy Saturday night. Who here has some spouse or significant other or family that's kind of ticked that you're here right now? The kind of second weekend before Christmas? Yeah, I'll raise my hand too. So I was telling the table earlier, I was like, they're asking how did this come about that I was coming to speak, and Graham and I have become friends, and as he was describing this weekend, like he emailed it to me, and he had the whole agenda line itemed out in this particular talk. He had my name already with the title next to it, and I was like, all right, well, that sounds like that's pretty fun. It could be interesting, but it's that weekend, so I talked to my wife, and we have 3 young kids. I was like, hon, this could be really cool. I know it's a Saturday night, second weekend before Christmas, but we could treat it as a weekend, go down to Williamsburg, have a lot of fun. So that was the plan. So we made reservations. And about 3 weeks ago, I started thinking about what could I get her for Christmas, my wife. And that's typically a lot earlier than what I planned for Christmas gifts. And I was like, oh, a Peloton bike. Megan, we were talking about the Peloton bike earlier. She's wanted a Peloton bike. So I ordered the Peloton bike. The delivery people call, and they say the only weekend, or basically weekend day that we can get it to you is Saturday the 15th. And I was like, oh, crap. There's no other day. Literally, I wanted her to have it before Christmas, because if it wasn't then, it was going to be after Christmas. So anyway, I had to tell my wife, hon, I'm sorry, I'm too busy. I have too many things going on. We can't get away for the whole weekend. I'll just go down to William & Mary for the night. She's like, what? What are you talking about? I've already said no to a couple different Christmas parties that we could have gone to if we were going to go down there for the whole weekend. So anyway, once she got her bike this morning, because it got delivered this morning, she was okay, and she's probably on her 5th class right now. So anyway, long-winded introduction, but I am super excited to be here. And so what I thought I would do is just to describe a little bit about my entrepreneurial journey so far. So that consists of the first company that I started called Snag-a-Job, and then a little bit of time in between before starting Go Happy, and describe a little bit about Go Happy, and then lessons learned between those 2 different ventures. And then I'd love to leave a good 15, 20 minutes for Q&A as well. So Just starting off, again, I was telling the table some of this earlier, but I grew up in Oklahoma, and growing up out in Tulsa, Oklahoma, my dad was a pastor. We had no business, kind of entrepreneurial genes or stuff going on in our family. But when I was 16 and halfway through high school, he decided, you know what, I want to start my own company. And he had been kind of thinking about it for a while. And he and my mom were both from Virginia, and so they wanted to get back to Virginia. So they decided that we were going to move to Virginia, and they were going to start a retail store. And they were going to start a jewelry store. And my dad didn't own any jewelry. My mom didn't own any jewelry. They had no real life savings to pour into this thing, but they decided, you know what, we're going to do it. So we moved to Williamsburg, and they ended up starting this jewelry store, and they were awesome about exposing me to all of the stuff that was kind of going on behind the scenes, everywhere from going to these jewelry shows and buying stuff to what goes on behind pricing this stuff and how do you price it, to repairs, to selling on the floor. And I had to work there because we had no money, and so, I was working as a 16-year-old in a jewelry store. And so that was awesome. I loved it. And they also did a really amazing job of shielding me from what I now realize were all of the extreme pressures that they were under at the time. Because when we moved, my brother was going to be a freshman in college at the University of Oklahoma. And so, they were trying to pay his way through, working as a pastor at a fairly small church. It's not like you're making a bunch of money and have a lot of life savings. So whatever they did have went into the initial purchase of the jewelry and trying to pay rent. And so they did an awesome job of shielding me from that. But what that then led to for me as I came to William & Mary was, you know what, I think I want to start my own business at some point. And I had no idea what. It just seemed like, hey, it was cool for them, and they seemed to kind of be making it work, kind of grinding their way through it. And about my junior year in college here, I started to think that, you know what, I think I might want to go into commercial real estate. And I still don't really know why I thought that was so interesting. I think part of it was appealing to me because you got to build something and create something that wasn't there, that people started to enjoy. I'd seen the people who owned the shopping center where my parents' jewelry store was, what looked like to me, have a pretty good life where, you're paying rent every month and they didn't seem to have to work that hard, so part of that was appealing. So anyway, I just started going to lunch with people who had been successful at commercial real estate here in town, and I just started calling them and asking them, hey, would you mind going to lunch with me, and networking with my professors to get them to introduce me to people who had been doing well at it. So anyway, almost to a person, these handful of people who I went and picked their brain about commercial real estate suggested, go to law school, focus on commercial real estate in law school, get out, practice with a bigger firm for 5 to 7 years, learn the ropes of what commercial real estate is all about, and then go start your own commercial real estate development company. So that was my plan. So I got out of here, went to law school. About a month into law school, I was like, holy Toledo, what did I sign up for? I hate this. But anyway, I made my way through law school, got out, went to D.C., went to work for a law firm up in D.C. doing commercial real estate, and very similarly, after really probably my first day, I was like, wow, I don't think I can do this for 5 to 7 years. Are there any attorneys in here? Not that there's anything wrong with being an attorney. I do have a handful of friends who actually like it. Most of them don't, but anyway. But I just knew that, man, I'm not going to be able to make this for 5 to 7 years. And again, I had this desire to start my own business. I thought it was going to be commercial real estate. But this was kind of in the 97, 98, 99 time frame, and I literally just started writing down every idea I had. I had a manila folder, and every idea I had, I was writing down. It didn't matter whether it was a better design for a ladder, or I had a motorcycle at the time, and I thought it should be easier to be able to drive my motorcycle up onto a pickup bed truck, so some online stuff, because the dot-com boom was occurring at that time. And so, anyway, I was kind of in this mindset of just looking for all these different opportunities, things that just seemed like they were frustrations of mine or frustrations of somebody else where it just should be done better, easier, and writing them down as, okay, well, what would I do differently? And I do think that's one of those things that is a muscle that we all need to exercise in terms of looking for these opportunities, these frustrations that we have and say, okay, what would I do about it? And just kind of even pencil something out real quick. Some of them we get more excited about, some of them we get less excited about, some of them once you do the research you realize something else is out there already. But for me at least, that was just this really helpful exercise. And so in April of 99, I was dating this girl at the time. She was getting her PhD in medical anthropology at American University. She was much too smart for me. That's not who I married. But she asked me to go online and do a search for her for an internship for the summer. So this fairly obscure field, she was having a hard time finding an internship. So she asked me if I'd go online because she didn't have internet at home, again, 99, so I had it at work. I didn't have it at home either. But I went online and did a search, and I didn't see that many sites that were geared towards internship positions. And at the time, Joel, you'll remember Monster.com and Career Builder and Hot Jobs and all of them. So I knew of all of them, and they were out there, but they didn't really cater towards internship positions. And then I was talking to my parents a couple days later who have this jewelry store, and I was describing this whole thing to them. My dad was like, you know what? We have a really hard time finding good hourly help at our jewelry store. Are there any sites that are geared specifically towards that? Because we've tried the newspaper, that really doesn't work. Career Builder, focuses more on the high-end stuff and Monster. And so I was like, you know what? I don't know. Like, I'm not that far out of school where I worked during school, and I don't ever remember seeing anything. So I went back online and did the search. I didn't see anything. I was like, somebody's got to be doing it. I'm just missing it, right? And so I kept doing the research, and then the mindset goes of, all right, well, if this was a good idea, Monster can easily come down market because Monster is selling to McDonald's already for their corporate level positions, and all the Career Builders doing the same thing. They could easily just say, we'll list your hourly positions for you too. So either they think it's not a good idea, or if it ended up being a good idea, they could go do it and they could dominate it. Or somebody else who's well-funded, who knows what the heck they're doing, who's been there, done that before, could go do this if it's a really good idea. So I just got myself in that loop of, all right, this is interesting, but I don't know what the heck I'm doing, and somebody else would go do it if it's a good idea. But then I was just consistently ruminating on this for the next several months, and I was listening to Tony Robbins tapes at the time. Do any of you know who Tony Robbins is? I know he can be kind of cheesy, right? But he's one of these self-help guys. But I was literally listening to his tapes because, as you know, the commute in D.C. is not great. Does anybody here live in D.C.? I know a handful of people at our table. Yeah, so I'd commute over the 14th Street Bridge every day, and I was listening to these tapes, and one of the things that he said just so stuck with me. He said, you know what? If everybody had the notion that if it was such a good idea, somebody else would be doing it, then nothing new would ever get done, right? And you think about that, and it just so makes sense, right? That if everybody has this notion, well, if it's such a good idea, somebody else would be doing it, then nothing new would ever get created. And that just so resonated with me at the time. It was what I needed to hear. I was like, you know what? Screw it. I'm going to do it. I never wanted to be an attorney my whole life anyway, so I literally took out every credit card I could before I left. I took out what little 401k money I had. I deferred all my law school loans. I turned in my resignation. All the attorneys there thought I was an absolute idiot, which they're probably right in thinking that. And I left the firm where I was and started what ended up becoming Snag-a-Job. And those, I'm going to show it. I only have one slide. I'll show it at the end. But what it depicts on this slide is so true of the way I felt during this first 4 or 5 years of Snag-a-Job, where you're all excited about your idea, right? And then you go throw yourself into it, and then all of a sudden you start to realize, man, this is going to be hard. And I know for me, we were excited about it. We get the site built by some independent contractor. That required more money than what I initially thought, so I had to start going and raising money from friends and family, which is like my parents, and my Uncle Bobby, and my Aunt Vicky, and my sister, and my roommate from William and Mary, and all these people. And I tell people all the time, it's one thing to lose your own money. None of us want to do that. It's a whole other thing to lose somebody else's money, and it's a whole other thing to lose somebody else's money who you're actually friends and family with and who you're going to sit down, around the Thanksgiving table with. And so that in and of itself, has anybody done that? Anybody raise money from friends and family? Yeah, so that just kind of gut-wrenching feeling that you get. And when we were struggling early on, it was painful. And I remember we actually started in Lightfoot, Virginia. You guys, Lightfoot's 15 minutes west of here towards Richmond. So I'd moved from D.C. back to here because that's kind of where my network of people were, where I thought I could raise money. So we're in Lightfoot, Virginia, and we had P.O. Box 674 in Lightfoot, Virginia. I just remember day after day going to that P.O. box, opening that lockbox, no checks, right? We'd send out invoices to people and stuff, no checks. Next day, no checks. Next day, no checks. Meantime, I had moved to a house that was about 2 miles from my parents' house. I'd also bought a puppy about 3 months before starting Snag-a-Job, which was also not very smart. And so my mom, bless her soul, would watch my puppy during the day for me. So every night when I would leave work, I'd have to go by, get my puppy. Every night when I walk in, what's the first thing my dad wants to know? We get any checks? right? Because they put a decent amount of their life savings into it. Over time, they ended up putting in their whole life savings, and then they borrowed everything they could against the jewelry store. And so I just remember going, there every night, and, we would be seeing like some traction, but it wasn't manifesting itself in terms of actual like significant revenue. He's like, are we going to make it? Yeah, we're going to make it. Why do you think we're going to make it? Well, because, I'm seeing these signs, and, we have job seekers who are actually getting jobs, and we've got these companies who are hiring people, and, it's going to work. He's like, well, how much longer is it going to take before it'll work? Like, monetarily, will it work? It's like, I don't know, but we're getting there, right? And it's hard to explain when somebody's not in it with you every single day, and you're trying to describe to them these little nuggets that you're getting. I call them those little nuggets early on in the kind of embryonic stages of a company. It's hard to relate the excitement to somebody who's not living in it every single day. So anyway, I just remember those nights going there to their house. I remember literally being on the road out calling on a client or a prospect, and I had our salesperson in the car with me. I only had one salesperson at the time. And we had to have my dad or somebody put in more money into the bank, or we weren't going to make payroll the next day. And there were only 5 employees at the time. But I was trying to kind of soft pedal the conversation because the salesperson's in the car, and I don't want to freak her out that we may not be able to make payroll because I don't want her to jump ship, because if she jumps ships, then we're really Ever Creek. And so trying to kind of soft pedal the conversation. Finally, it gets to the point where he's just not getting it. And I'm like, Dad, look, if you don't put in more money into the bank tomorrow, we're not going to make payroll. He's like, all right. So we hang out, and she's silent, and this person's never silent. And we sit there in silence for, I don't know, what felt like forever. It's probably like 3 or 4 minutes. And finally she's like, is it really that bad? And I was just like, no, it's fine. I was like, it's just timing, accounts receivable, accounts payable. We're totally fine. We just needed to bridge us over. So anyway, there were just those times, where it's kind of funny to say now, but at the time it stunk. And I remember one other story is, because again, I think these are just these things that I think people, they look at somebody from, all right, you had this idea and then it turned into X, right? It's like, that had to have been awesome, such an amazing ride. And certain aspects of it, yes, absolutely. But there are those points along the way when you have no idea whether you're going to actually make it or not that make it gut-wrenching. And I just remember another time, you all know TJX companies? So you own, TJ Maxx and Marshalls, and we spend a lot of money at those stores, unfortunately. But anyway, they do have great deals. But we went and we would do these pilot programs for these bigger companies, to show them that we could make it work for them. Because we weren't this, Monster.com or Career Builder that had a lot of oomph behind its brand. And so we would have to go and prove our worth in order for them to sign a longer-term contract with us. So anyway, we got a pilot with TJX companies, which was awesome for us. It would be a huge deal. This is at a time, too, where every single client mattered in terms of whether we were going to make payroll. And we did this 3-month pilot, and we thought we crushed it. And the guy, the head of HR, it was amazing there, nice guy. So we go back in to do the pilot conversion call, and we walk in, and we kind of shoot the breeze with this guy, who ends up actually being the father of the guy who founded Instagram. That's another cool story. He retired shortly after Facebook bought them. But anyway, so we go back in to Doug, and we're shooting the breeze with him. And he's like, yeah, so we're not going to move forward. We only made 1 hire. And I was like, what? Like, we had processed thousands of applications to their 1,800 stores. And I was like, can you kind of walk us through it? And he kind of walked us through it. And I was like, oh, all right. So I'm with the salesperson. So we go across the street to the bar. And that was one of those times where I was just like, oh my gosh, if we can't make it work for them, how are we going to make this thing work? We thought we crushed it for these people. And so anyway, I'm a big believer in the fact that you cannot let your mind go to, what if this doesn't work? Because if you let your mind go to, if this doesn't work, you will start giving yourself all sorts of outs, right? Like you start to plan these backup plans. Well, we gave it a good ride, and we did our best, but the market just wasn't ready for it yet, or this other competitor, well, I'll go do this next. And I think you start to just give yourself all sorts of these outs. And so I was just the mindset that I'm not going to let my mind go there. But my mind definitely went there at the bar after the TJX meeting. But we get back to the office, and we end up digging in, and ultimately that ended up being a great thing for us because it changed some of the ways that we actually outreach to the managers of these different stores and how we conducted our pilot programs. Long story short, we ended up being able to convert TJX companies about 2 years later into what now is one of our longest standing clients at Snag-a-Job. So anyway, we were finally able, after 4.5 years, to get ourselves to profitability. Thank goodness. And that was a huge pivotal point for us. We were growing nicely. We ended up by 2006. We started in 2000. By 2006, we had started to get approached by different VC investors. I always felt like there was a much bigger market opportunity out there that we needed to take advantage of, and the only way we were going to be able to do that is if we did raise funding, because we had 2 salespeople at the time. We were limited in terms of how much marketing dollars we could spend. So we ended up raising a Series A. We did a $9 million Series A with a couple different VC firms. We were about 20 people when we did that. In July of 2006, by the end of that year, we were at 100 people. And we were talking about this at the table earlier too, is that to me, I was most concerned in that kind of trajectory up that we would have our culture diluted, because I felt like the culture that we had was our competitive differentiator. Hard to articulate in an investor presentation or whatever, but I did passionately feel like that because the people who were on our team were just so passionate about what we did, and they knew that our customers were our lifeblood, and if we did not take care of them to the nth degree, then they were going to flee and go someplace else. Because, again, my 2 biggest fears coming out of the gates was that Monster or some of the bigger entities would come down market. Well, Q1 analyst call for Monster in 2001 was, hey, we've identified the hourly market as a $2 billion market. We're going to come after it. We were like, uh-oh, right? We were a year into it. 2 weeks later, CareerBuilder announced the same thing. Neither one of them ended up making a deep penetration into the hourly market. And I think so much of it was the fact that it was just one other thing that they were doing. Their employees weren't nearly as passionate about it as what our employees were. So I was concerned that, if we hire all these other people and they outnumber the people who've been here forever and who've lived through this, are we going to make payroll or not, taking pay cuts, all that other stuff, cleaning your own bathrooms, then are these people going to care as much? And will that rub off on the other people, and will that dilute the offering that we have to our customers? So we invested very heavily in the culture. And I think, again, that was probably the biggest differentiator that we had as we scaled then from 20 people to, now it's 500 people. So anyway, I stayed in the CEO role there until 2013, and then left the CEO role, stayed on as the chairman of the company until 2016. And then we sold a majority interest in the company at that time. And there's a whole lot more to that story, and maybe we can dig into this in the Q&A. I could be sensitive to time here. I got to fast forward. All right, so 2014, 2015, I'm kind of taking off, but I'm trying to figure out what do I want to go do next. And, it's probably, okay, well, do I do consulting work just on my own? I sat on a couple boards, do investing stuff. And I did kind of a hodgepodge of those things, but I so miss being a part of a team and trying to accomplish something that was kind of against the odds and do something out there that was really, interesting and hopefully significant and making an impact in other people's lives. And so I had this idea that I wanted a tool to help me be more intentional about the most important areas of my life. And that really stemmed from a time at Snag a Job when we were in kind of the throes of are we going to make it or not, where I had no relationship with my friends. I kind of neglected them. Same thing with family. All I did was work. And I got to a point in my life where I was like, you know what? I got to have more balance in my life. And so I started to try to be more intentional about these other areas of life that I cared about, ultimately, more than work. But I was a heck of a lot more intentional about work than I was about my relationships or any other area. So anyway, I was like, you know what? I want to find an interactive tool, because I had been doing it in this manual way for the 10 years, between 2005 and kind of 2015. And I didn't find an interactive tool that I really liked and that resonated with me. I was like, you know what? I'm going to start doing discovery work and just finding out that other people have the same issue. And so that was the initial idea of what ultimately has turned out to be Go Happy, was just picking people's brains about, okay, walk me through, like, how do you set goals and how are you intentional about your work? And most people could articulate that very concisely in terms of how they set goals at work. But when I would dig into, okay, well, what are the other areas of life that are important to you? And kind of rank what is most important to you in life. And then when I would ask them, how do you set goals in those other areas of life, it was not that articulate, right? It was like, well, my partner and I will sit down at the beginning of the year, we'll talk about maybe what vacations we want to take, maybe how much money we want to save, but there really wasn't that much intentionality going against these other areas of life. And the one that stuck out the most, that people almost everybody would rank as either number one or number two as most important to them in life was their relationships. And so we felt like, all right, if we could help build a tool to help people be more intentional about their most important relationships, that seems like that would be a valuable tool to be able to provide to people. And so, we initially set out to say, okay, there are three pieces to that we feel like we could help people with. One is helping people kind of share life with people when they're not together. So sharing pictures and videos and that kind of thing, but not in a social media kind of way where it's posturing and it's, out there for anybody and their brother to be able to see. And not just the duck face, but, show your double chins too, right? And then the second part was that we really wanted to help create a tool that could help facilitate people getting together with the people that they like to get together with, right? All of you are incredibly busy, right? You're all working, you're in school, you have friends, you have family, you have other hobbies. So finding the time to actually go do stuff with other people is really hard. And so we were trying to develop some tools to help people with that. The third part was just trying to help people be thoughtful about these people, where they wanted to be thoughtful about the things that were important to them, but there really wasn't a CRM tool for people who are the important people in your life. Like you might have Salesforce, right, at work, or whatever CRM tool you use at work. So we decided at first, let's go tackle the piece around trying to help people get together in real life. And what we then realized was that, our most avid users are really using this to just share life with each other, even in between get-togethers, because we would dig in with them, and I know you talked about getting out of the building, right, kind of the goob thing, right, that you do a session on, you're not going to learn anything, be inside the building really. Is when we're going out and we're talking to our most avid users, it's that, hey, we're using this platform because it allows us to share things authentically. We can just share the good, the bad, and it keeps those conversations more organized than what we can do in group text. And so since April, so we've been at this for about 2 years now. Since April, we've really been working on this platform that Kurt described, where it's in essence what we call Backstage social media, which tries to marry the privacy of group messaging with the interactive sharing of social media. So that's where we've been focused since then. And if we could, hey, Mike, can you bring up that slide, buddy? So have any of you heard of the trough of despair? Yeah? Lived through it? So this is the emotional journey of creating anything great. And I was mentioning earlier that I could, kind of talk my way through this from a Snagajob perspective. I could also talk you through where we are right now and go happy, or where we think we are right now. So when you initially have the idea, right, it's like, dude, this is the best idea ever, right? After you've really made the commitment to go for it. This is going to be fun. Then it's, wow, this is harder than I thought it was going to be. This is going to be a lot of work. And you get to this point down here in the bottom where it's like, what in the world did I do, right? I had a great job. My spouse had a great job. We were making income. Now we're not making anything, and we have a lot of money going out of the door. What in the world are we doing, right? And then you finally start to get to that point, hopefully, well, okay, but it still sucks, right? And then hopefully you start to make your way up where it's like, maybe it's going to work, maybe it's not. And so I definitely lived through this whole thing at Snagajob. I would say we're probably or I hope at least we're in the stage right now with Go Happy. So 3 quick learnings, okay? What time do we need to wrap up? Yeah. Okay, 7:27. All right. So 3 quick learnings. One is this, right? It is that, again, and I know some of you are doing your own thing now, or you're going to go do your own thing, but it's hard. There's just no other way around it. It's just hard. But I would look at it as this way. Any idea that you have, any new startup that you go do, all it is just, it's a series, really, of hypotheses. I think this is an opportunity. I think this problem exists. And there are these different iterative points where whatever your initial idea may have been may not be what the market wants, right? So it's imperative that you're passionate about what you want to do. It's also imperative that the market actually wants what you're going to go do. And so, like in this particular instance where I thought that, you know what? People need an interactive tool to help them be more intentional about their most important areas in life. And what I realized was that people in the wild who were coming across this, they just weren't going to take the time to spend on it and invest in this tool to come up with what the most important areas in life were for them and then set goals in them and stuff. And so I would just say, one is you have to be able to have both the passion for what you're doing and have the market actually want what you're doing. 2, just realize that there are going to be multiple iterations over time. There's just no other way around. And just look at them as hypotheses. And when something doesn't work, awesome, you just learned something. And I think so many people have the mindset that when something doesn't work the way you want it to, that's a failure. I just failed. That failed. Whatever. And I had a life coach that I had who was so helpful to me. And he said, Sean, you keep saying that you failed at this, this was a failure over here. He said, I want you to stop and have a different paradigm. And he said, think about it in this way. The things you keep talking about as failures are actually either mistakes or they're errors. And he said, a mistake is to get off at exit 274, but you're just not paying attention. You're on your phone, whatever, GPS isn't working, and you drive right past it, and it's like, oh, shoot, I missed my exit, right? You get off at exit 275, and you come backwards. An error is you've never been to the Mason School of Business before. Your GPS isn't working. You think you should get off at exit 275, and so you do, and then you realize, oh, you know what? I should have gotten off at exit 274, and you backtrack. He was like, that's what you keep describing is you've never done something before. You test it. It doesn't work the way you wanted it to work. And you keep calling it a failure. That's not a failure. That's an error. He said, save failure for when you don't have the guts to go do something that you really want to go do because you're too scared that you may not get the outcome that you want. Save that for the word failure. And I don't know about you, but there's like this dark cloud over your head whenever you think about the word failure, right? I failed, this failed. It's just negative. An error in testing things and having these hypotheses that you're going to go test, that's a heck of a lot more positive. And I think it frees us up to go do a lot more stuff where it's like, hey, I think we ought to really go try X. Okay, how do we microsize that? How do we go iteratively find out if that's even a thing? If it doesn't work out, who cares? We just tried it. And we didn't go gung-ho and try to hit a home run. We did a little bunt. We did a little single, right? We broke it down to see if it was going to work or not. And so I just think having that mindset, regardless of whether you're starting your own company or not, inside of a bigger company, it doesn't matter. Like I just think having that iterative mindset is so incredibly important and separating out mistakes, errors, and failure. The second thing for me that was a huge learning is back to the culture side. And I am an absolute believer that your people strategy is every bit as important as this strategy, the business strategy. And the 2 things that I would really harp on is 1, ensuring that you have a mission, like a company mission statement, and that you have core values. Because a mission statement, when you're going through the grind, right, this is like gears grinding in a bike down there. When you're going through that, it's so hard. Your people, they're grinding in Excel sheets. They're, doing whatever, like where you're just lost in the drudgery of it. You're like, why in the world am I doing this? This stinks. Well, you know what? If you can point back to a mission statement that's making a positive impact on the world, and you can draw up examples of how you're actually living that out that would not be done if it wasn't for you and your team, that's what gets everybody juiced. I saw it at Snag a Job where our mission statement there was to put people in the right fit position so that they could maximize their potential and live fulfilling lives. We would bring out job seeker testimonials on that every single week. We did a company meeting. People got more excited about that than any other thing that we did because you get these awesome stories about, hey, I was able to buy my kids Christmas presents because I got a job through you guys. I was able to care for my spouse who had cancer because I got a job through you guys. I got my butt off the street selling drugs because I got a job through you guys. And literally, like stories like that. Everybody gets pumped, right? It's like, dude, I'm working for a bigger cause. And similarly at Go Happy now, where we're trying to help people nurture these relationships that are important to them, making sure even when it's hard right now, even when we don't have that many people who are using it, when we can pull out those nuggets of here's how we're actually impacting this person's life, that's what gets people fired up. And so I just encourage you, when it's a younger company or whatever, like even if you're in a bigger company, right, be pulling out those stories all the time of how you're positively impacting people. So that's number 2. The third thing I would say is don't let it define you, right? And I think, again, and this is more from the entrepreneurial side of it, is that it's so easy as an entrepreneur to let your entity that you've started and are trying to grow define who you are, because it's just so personal, right? You've thrown yourself into it. Everybody knows that it was Megan's idea, it's Megan's company, right? And all of a sudden, like, that's just you, right? And for all of us, probably, work isn't who we are, right? Like we talk about in these settings, like, so what do you do? What do you do? What do you do, right? But ultimately, at the end of the day, that's not what's most important to any of us. There was this awesome book that was written by this woman who's a hospice nurse. It's called 5 Regrets of the Dying. And what she found is what, we probably all know, right? One of the top 5 regrets for people is I spent too much time at work. And I didn't, and when so that was number 2. Number 1 was I didn't live a life that was true to me. And so I just think that for all of us, right, especially when you're in the throes of doing something entrepreneurial where it can tend to be so self-identifiable, is don't let it define you. It's not who you are. I know I struggle with that all the time, but I find myself getting in a much better headspace when I don't do that, because when the times are going bad, you can get in the dumps. When they're going great, think you're the best thing ever, and you're not. So anyway, I just think having that mindset of, all right, I'm going to pour myself into this. It's going to be a heck of a lot of fun. It's going to be hard too, but it's not going to define who I am. I've got other things in my life that actually do define who I am, and not getting yourself wrapped around that. So those are my 3 key takeaways. Now I'm going to ask again, do we have any time? All right, sweet. Oh, and I would say, too, if there are questions, since I know it's being live streamed, if people could walk to one of the 2 mics to ask them.
Hey, thank you very much. That was great. You had mentioned the importance of culture and kind of some of the things you did, especially as you scaled with the stories and things like that. I was kind of curious your process on maintaining your culture and keeping that as a strength, especially while you were kind of working through that golden nuggets period where maybe you didn't have the great successes and the great stories.
Yeah. So I think I look at the people strategy piece as really being 3 components. There is what I would call the strategic clarity piece, which is the bit I talked about earlier, which is the mission statement and the core values and the vision statement. And I think those are important to have right from the get-go. The vision is just casting out, whether you want to take it 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, whatever it might be, is kind of this is the picture of what we want to become and the impact that we want to go have. The mission statement is, hey, how are we making the world a better place every day by the fact that we're in existence, right? And again, to me, that is the most critical piece of that. The core values are, how do we behave as a company, right? Like, how are we going to treat each other as teammates, especially, when it's early on and you're working a ton of hours and it's tough and you don't have a lot to show for what you've been doing. It's easy to get on each other's nerves, right? Because it's like, it's like your spouse, right? It's like you become so close that every little thing they do can start to irritate you. And so those core values, I think, are really, really critical. And so I would put those in the bucket of strategic clarity. The second thing I would say within that people strategy is developing a cohesive team. And do you all ever read Patrick Lencioni? You know who that is? He wrote The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team and The 4 Obsessions of an Extraordinary Executive, and he's got a handful. If you haven't read it, I would really highly recommend his stuff. He writes in a fabled style manner, really easy to read and digest. And so what he advocates for in this cohesive leadership team model is that at the bottom of it is that you've got a level of trust that's a vulnerable level of trust, where literally, like, you admit what you're not good at, you admit what you're not good at, I admit when I'm wrong, and you have this vulnerable level of trust with people. If you have that trust, then you can have good conflict, right? Because too many times people will avoid the hard conversations, or when they do have them, they've let it build for too long, and it ends up being a personal attack. And so if you have that level of trust, then you can have good conflict. Like, we always encourage, I want heated debates, right? I mean, I don't want people to not say what they really think because they're afraid they're going to tick somebody off. Say what you think, right? That's how you get the best out of everybody. And so if you have that level of trust, you can have good conflict. If you have good conflict, then you can have commitment because you feel like, all right, well, at least you've heard what I had to say. I may not agree, but now we can put all hands in and commit. And if you don't have that, what ends up happening, and we've probably all seen it, right, is you have this discussion as a team. One person doesn't agree with it because they're like, whatever. Kurt's already made up his mind. I'm not even going to say what I think. You go back to the team, and it's like, okay, so what'd you guys decide? Well, we decided X, and that's what Kurt wanted to do, so that's what we're going to do. I'm like, what? That's the stupidest thing ever. It's like, I know, but that's what Kurt wanted to do, so that's what we're going to do, right? Well, that's not commitment, right? And then, there's no accountability if you don't have the commitment, because when it doesn't work, everybody says, well, I know it wasn't going to work from the beginning, right? But it was Kurt's idea, so that's what we did. And if you don't have accountability, then you'll get results. So that's the pyramid, is trust, conflict, commitment, accountability, and results. And then the third piece of that culture is the reinforcing practices. And that's where it's like, okay, well, cool, you've got your core values, but they're just hung up on the wall. Well, in our case, we would do 360s. where everybody around you, under you, over you, whatever, gives you feedback. And those were all geared around the values. How are you living out the values? People's performance reviews and their bonuses were half tied to their kind of metrics within inside the business and their goals that we had set and they had set for the business. The other half was all dictated by them living out the values, which was informed by the 360 process. And so that's an example, I would say, where, you know what, you can say that these values are important, but unless you actually hold people accountable to them, then they really don't mean anything. So there are a number of different things, from the reinforcing practices, from your interviewing processes to your actual recruiting processes to the performance reviews and feedback and so forth, that I think you want to have in place to reinforce whatever it is that you've said is important to you as a company. So, yeah.
So from your chart up there, in the dark swamp of despair, if your whole team's in there, what can you do as a leader to kind of throw that rope down and bring them up?
Get a couple bottles of bourbon. I think, I mean, and literally, like, this is so fresh for us. And again, I hope that we're coming out the other side. But, you know, the best thing I can say is that you have to hang on to the fact that, look, there is a problem worth solving. We are iterating our way to helping people with this problem. We may not have figured out yet how to appropriately do it, which is where I felt like we have lived for a while now. But we know it's a problem. We know we're passionate about it. We are going to figure this out. And I think being able to find those little nuggets, again, whether it's a discovery session that you had where people's like, oh my gosh, like, yes, if you could do that, that would be awesome. Or maybe it's just them telling you the problem that was the problem that you thought that they may have, right? Where it's like, well, you know what? I don't really keep up with my cousins that are extended across the country now because I got off Facebook because I just, I didn't want to deal with it anymore. And, group messaging is just annoying to me, so I don't like being on those. So I just don't see what's happening in their life. And I love seeing what's happening with my nephews and my nieces. And so you bring that back to the team, and it's like, look, this is exactly somebody who we should be able to go help. And so I think finding any of those little nuggets, right? Somebody writes in and says, oh my gosh, this is great. I just found you guys. This is something I've been looking for. Don't lose that opportunity to present that back to the team. So I think it's whether you're getting positive feedback on somebody's experience with you or it's them just saying what their problem is. And everybody's going to be looking to the leader, right? Are you getting just in this place of despair? And all of us go through it, right? But like, are you staying there, right? Like, you're that way yesterday, you're that way today, right? And somebody told me, and I think it's so true, is people aren't just reading or listening to what you're saying, they're reading your body language all the time, right? So if it's one of these where it's like they pick up on that, and then they're like, dude, should I be looking? And they know they're probably not going to get that much severance like what they might at a bigger company because you just can't afford it, right? And so they think they have to be proactive in protecting their family and stuff so that, you want to make, not that you want to be dishonest with people, but you don't want to freak them out either unnecessarily. And so I just think making sure you're careful with letting yourself get into a bad place and stay in a bad place and making sure you're just proactively pumping them with any of the good nuggets that you're getting.
First of all, thank you very much for the talk. I thought that was great. You talked a lot about the culture impact in the first company, but you didn't talk a lot about it in the second company. Can you talk more about that?
Yeah. So we're a small team. We're literally 5 of us, and so it looks more similarly to the way it did, I would say, at Snag-a-Job early on. But even now, we have our mission statement, and that is to help people build good relationships so that they can live happier lives. We have our core values. We actually just did a team offsite, went up to Wintergreen, which is up near Charlottesville 3 weeks ago, and just did a day session, really. And I was like, man, can we really afford to take a day and a half off right now? We got all these things that we need to do. I tell you what, it was so good for us. We came back, and we've been so much more productive just because of that. And we were already operating well. I mean, they're all guys that are, we all work together at Snag-a-Job, so we all know each other really well already and know we like working together. But even then, if you don't take the time to just talk about, okay, how are we doing, right? And how can we be getting better as a team? And like one of the things that we did, which we had done at Snag a Job and I love, but we just hadn't done it at Go Happy yet, is let's all talk about one area that we would love for each of the other folks on the team to improve upon, and what's one thing that they do that you just love and you want them to keep doing. And then what each of us then did commit to was, you know what, I've taken this feedback from these 4 other people, and I'm going to pick one of those things or a couple of those things that people have identified that they would like to see me do differently, and I commit to doing that differently. And so it's stuff like that where, you know, you take the time to invest just in the team. And it's similar to a relationship, right? It's like if you don't take the time to actually be intentional about it and invest in it, then it's just going to kind of fray over time. And so I think for us, even now, it's really important. I think that's an example of it. In us having our core values, us having our mission statement, you know, us casting our vision. We're so small right now, we don't set a 3-year strategic plan like we did at Snag a Job and 1-year operating plan. We literally set 90-day OKRs. I don't know if you guys talk about OKRs or not, but you know, we set 90-day OKRs, and you know, we at the beginning of each week we plan, we scrum every single day to talk about how we're doing against them. And at the end of each week we do a retro. And another example, I guess, of investing in the culture is our retros consist of, we go around the horn, where are we on a scale of 1 to 5, like as individuals? You know, I'm a 1, I'm a 2, I'm a 3, I'm a 4, I'm a 5. We then talk about what did not go well that week, what did go well that week, and then we say what our challenge was for the month. We each of us come up with a personal challenge. It could be that I want to run more, I want to do a date night with my kids, I want to, you know, whatever it might be, and then you list your moment for that week. And typically that's something outside of work, right? It's that, oh my gosh, my kids and I, we went sledding and that was amazing. And so things like that where, you know, you're building just the chemistry amongst the team, you're showing people that you care about them more than just a cog in the wheel. Which, you know, hopefully you do. So, I don't know. That's a handful of different things that we're trying to do, even now. So.
Can I ask you a more philosophical question? Because I think you keyed in on a couple of interesting things about leaning into errors and kind of embracing like a meritocracy from a knowledge perspective. And these are like concepts that Dalio has made really, you know, forefront at Bridgewater, and I think that a lot of successful companies lean into their failures and accept them and learn from them, like you said with the errors. How come you don't think more people want to do that or are willing to accept it in the business world? It almost seems you're stonewalled from the fear of making the error. How come we can't get past that?
Yeah.
It's kind of philosophical. I know you may not have like a streamlined answer for
Yeah.
that, but I think it's kind of, you keyed in on a lot of the things that other companies do that makes them successful, but it seems like a lot of people fear going into those avenues.
Yeah. So I don't know the macro, right? But I mean, just, and all of us could probably give our own personal stories. I mean, I think one that's just true at an individual level is, you know, all of y'all, obviously, you've excelled at your careers. You've probably excelled all the way through school, which is how you got into this program and blah, blah, blah. And that takes a certain type of temperament, right? It's like, I'm trying to get all A's, right? I'm trying to be the best at whatever it is that I do. And so I think at times that can then lead to a hesitancy to not be the best, right? And so if you've kind of always been the best and you're not sure what kind of result you might get by going and doing this particular thing, right? Maybe you're a little reluctant to lean into that thing because, dude, what if that doesn't work, right? That's going to have a negative impact on my reputation inside of the company. And at the end of the day, I mean, companies are just made up of individuals, right? And so again, my experience has been when we would bring in people from outside of the company who had been really successful someplace else, and you know, they were especially at a kind of a higher level, they were much more reluctant to want to go in and run these iterative tests, especially if they had been at bigger companies. Not so much if they had been at smaller kind of, you know, hyper-growth entrepreneurial companies, but if they had been at bigger companies, because if you didn't do something well, then that was a really kind of a, you know, negative mark and, you know, in your resume, basically. And so, I don't know. I mean, again, it's a bigger macro question. I think my experience has been that, you know, people are just reluctant to do that because they think the company or their leader or whoever is going to think negatively of them. And so I think as an organization, as a leader, it's just making sure that you're setting the stage for, hey, I want you to do that. I will look at it as a failure if you don't go do that, because that means you were too scared to go try something new because you were too scared you were not going to get the outcome that you wanted, right? And then think just reframing it for people and saying, hey, look, I want you to try new stuff, right? Let's be smart about how we go try it. We don't want to go spend $1 million on something to try it when we could spend, $10,000 on it. But I think just making sure that we're all encouraging people to take those, those risks and test these hypotheses. So, I don't know how responsive that is or not, but I hated my philosophy class here. It was probably my least favorite class. Not only was it philosophy, it was a summer school class that made it 8 a.m. in the Wren Chapel up in the top. And my professor, he was like the prototypical philosophy professor. He would walk in, he wore no shoes, he wore shorts and a wife beater. And that's what he walked in with every day. And I hated that class. So anyway, I don't know, I'm probably a very good person to ask a philosophical question of.
So one of my biggest questions is, for those potential entrepreneurs out there, when do you know to call it quits? Because I know we hear a lot of these success stories of, I was at rock bottom, but then you eventually got up to the top. We also hear of, there's these products that just simply don't work.
Yeah.
So when do you hit that point where, you know what, it's time to scrap it up and move on to the next venture?
Yeah, I think part of it is, does the problem still exist that you were trying to solve for? And if so, I'm a big fan of you continue to kind of pivot and iterate until you find out how can I help people go solve this problem. And in that case, then I think it's just a matter in a lot of cases of funding. Can you make it financially continue to work long enough so that you can keep at it, right? Whether that is being able to raise more money, whether that means going without a salary, whatever it might be. And so I think a lot of times the funding piece of it dictates it almost more than anything. I think it's different when you realize that that really wasn't a problem for people, right? Because if it's not really a problem for people, then you need to go find a different problem to solve, right? Because, no matter how much iterating you do, it's like, okay, well, there just wasn't a problem there, or it just wasn't that big of a problem, right? And it's not a big enough market opportunity to warrant actually, keeping at it and, trying to build this company around it. So I think it's two different issues. If the problem still exists, it's how long can I hang on, right, and continue to iterate as fast as I can. If you find out it's not a problem or a big enough problem, then it's probably time to, all right, I'm going to move on to the next one. Yeah, Matt, go ahead. While Matt's coming up here, by the way, I would definitely encourage you all to listen to podcasts, like anybody, especially who's thinking about doing this. Like Without Fail is a great one. Gimlet Media does that one. Reid Hoffman's is awesome. What's the guy's name? Aussie. I can't remember now. But anyway, Without Fail and Reid Hoffman's podcast, both are ones that I would listen to. We were talking about Peloton a second ago. Again, it's one of those that's easy to look at and say, oh my gosh, they're an overnight success. Then you go and they actually listen to the story and you realize that guy was who founded that, very similar. It's like, how am I going to make this thing work? I don't think I'm going to be able to make it work. And so it's just interesting, no matter who it is that seemed like they were overnight successes, it wasn't, right? It just wasn't. So anyway, sorry, Matt, where'd you go?
Okay, you kind of alluded to selling the majority stake in Snag a Job. You said there's more to that story. Can you just highlight that? I'm just curious.
Yeah. So this is where, in our case, we took on institutional capital because I felt like in order for us to be able to maximize the opportunity, we needed to be able to go do that. We could have continued to grown the company just from our organic growth and funded it in that way, but we have never, in my opinion, been able to accelerate, the growth and really take advantage of it. But I would say when you do that, just know that just changes the game, all right? Because we did a Series A of 9, we did a follow-on Series B of 5, we did a Series C that was, 30-ish, and so, the more capital that you're taking on to take and expedite the growth, the more ownership other people have, the more they have their own thoughts on how to grow the company best. And it's like, when you take on capital, they're not giving you the capital because They want to see it sit on the balance sheet, right? They're giving it to you, and you've asked for it so that it can expedite growth. And a lot of times when you're going out and you're presenting to these different VCs, you want to put your best foot forward, and you're going to show in your pro formas that, okay, we're going to take this in, and that will accelerate growth to this extent. And so you're putting out there probably a best case scenario in a lot of cases, right? We raised 10, and we're going to grow from 40 million in revenue to 60 million in revenue because you think that's what you need to do in order to excite them to invest in the company. But as soon as you close that round, what's your budget for the next year? What you just showed them, right? I mean, you can't this is what we're going to do. We're going to do 60, and then you close the round, and then a month later, here's our budget for the next year, and it's 48, right? That's not going to go over well. And so I just think, again, it's a longer story, but for me, the game changed in a good way, in a lot of ways, whenever we brought on institutional capital. But it then gets to the point where, it's not as fun, and they have their own thoughts on, what needs to be done. And there's all sorts of different ways to structure the deal in terms of, who has the right to make certain decisions and stuff. But in 2016, really, as it got to kind of 2014, 2015, we were starting to try to position the company to go do a recap of it at that point, which basically meant we were going to bring in a new set of investors, replace the old set of investors, because we had friends and family who had been able to get out at some of the earlier rounds. We still had some who had decided to stay in, but we had the VCs who were in from that Series A, B, and C who were ready to get out. And so anyway, we ended up doing the recap with a bigger private equity company. LinkedIn actually came in as one of the investors in that round. But yeah, it just, I guess, to summarize it, I would say, know what you want as an entrepreneur, right? Let's say in your case, right, you're going to go take and potentially franchise this and, grow it from, one location to 10 to 20. And what is it that you want at the end of the day? If it's that you want a lifestyle business because you love it and you want to be in it and you could see yourself being in it for the next 20 years, you may not want to raise institutional capital. It may be that, I'm cool with growing it myself organically. Yeah, we're going to grow at it at a slower pace. There's a risk that somebody else is going to come into the market and maybe kind of, box me out, but I'm willing to take that risk. I'm going to do it this way because I want to do it my way. If it's that, I think this is a market that can be huge, and I'm totally cool with the fact that the industry or the company is going to change, and I'm not going to be one calling all the shots, and I think this is just what we need to do, and I'm comfortable with that risk, then awesome, go raise institutional capital. I think it's just important to go into it with eyes wide open and talking to plenty of people who've done it in different ways, right? And seeing what were the pros, what were the cons, what were their learnings from it.
Well, thank you very much for coming back.
Oh, you
yes.
bet.
There we go. We have a small gift for you from the Online MBA program office. I believe it's like a super duper charger for your computer and laptop when you're traveling.
Sweet.
So
I always need that.
something, yes, obviously. It was really interesting, this slide. For those of you who are in the room that were with us when we were creating the Online MBA, we went through this. I remember crawling through that swamp of despair and having to bring our faculty onto the other side of it. And I'm happy to say, though, and report that I think the school would really say that we are really at the top of the other side now, and this is probably one of the most proudest things that the school's created. So, but we went through this. I hope everyone enjoyed their dinner. We will see you tomorrow morning at breakfast downstairs. Thank you for coming.
Thank you all.